Bismillahir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. I bear witness that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah and Allah alone. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the last divinely sent messenger and the seal of the prophethood, through whom the Quran was revealed over 14 centuries ago, is his last divinely sent messenger and the seal of the prophethood. Amin. We want to welcome our friends and guests in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I am your host, El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan, coming to you again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media, for those of you not familiar with it, is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Today's topic for discussion: the epidemic of violence in America's urban centers and what can be done about it. We have two special guests for today's program, and even though the bios on these brothers, especially on the first one, Amir Khalid, is quite lengthy, I'm going to read the bios with you in their entirety because they are very germane. Their bios are very germane to this topic. And so I want you to know the caliber of the brothers that will be addressing this issue today. El-Hajj Amir Khalid A is an internationally recognized community activist and leader who formerly served as the assistant to the public safety director for the city of Cleveland for youth gang intervention. He has also served as a gang prevention and investigative specialist for the CMSD, Gang Task Force. And when our brother comes on, maybe the first thing he can do is address what this acronym CMSD stands for. He is Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of the Coalition for a Better Life, DBA Peace in the Hood, Inc., an organization dedicated to peace, justice, and empowerment. And he serves as a spokesperson for the international, formerly the National Council for Urban Peace, Justice, and Empowerment. The International Council is a 25-year-old collective of more than 35 grassroots and community-based organizations and stakeholders throughout the United States. It is the largest faith and community-based collaborative dealing with youth gang crime and violence, radicalization of communities, and cross-cultural issues in the United States. As an internationally acclaimed expert on urban violence, youth empowerment, and gang intervention, Amir Samad has lectured throughout the U.S. and has appeared on national radio and television shows such as Tavis Smiley, Nightline, Keeping It Real with Reverend Al Sharpton, CNN, and PBS as a leading authority on these issues. He has served as a convener for the International Council, formerly National Council for Urban Peace and Justice Leadership Summits. In 1987, Khalid Samad, the late Omar Ali Bey, and other community leaders formed the Coalition for a Better Life, which addressed the myriad of challenges facing urban America: racism, drugs, gang violence, police corruption, miseducation, and an absence of leadership, just to name a few. This unified coalition of faith and community-based groups involved Muslims, Christians, the Nation of Islam, Jews, Hebrew Israelites, liberals, conservatives, civil rights activists, and community activists, as well as cultural nationalists. This rainbow coalition was inclusive of all ethnic groups and nationalities. This level of cooperation under Muslim leadership was unprecedented in America, given this country's history of interreligious relations. The coalition was recognized as a national model for crime prevention and intervention. The Coalition for a Better Life designed and implemented 5 monumental projects that were nationally acclaimed. These projects were: number 1, community empowerment, drug patrols, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they involve street engagement of violent drug dealers, as well as assisting them to cross over into productive lifestyles by dealing with dealer addiction issues. Number 2, rites of passage. Number 3, mentoring under an initiative known as Project Adam. Number 4, entrepreneurship under Project Ujima. Number 5, cultural empowerment, a hip-hop exchange which included such nationally known rap artists as Public Enemy and X-Clan, as well as the nationally known and internationally known spoken word artists, the Last Poets. These initiatives together formed Cleveland's first community empowerment project. The notorious King Kennedy housing estates averaged 3 homicides and shootings a week during this time. The efforts of the Coalition for a Better Life sparked a multi-million-dollar infusion of improvements and services into King Kennedy and throughout the other housing estates in Cleveland. In 2003, Brother Samad and his team developed and initiated Project Community Empowerment, which was a holistic public health approach to deal with crime, violence, and self-destructive behavior. Peacemakers Alliance was an original component of the initiative. Based on a unicentric rites of passage model, this initiative was replicated in several cities across the nation. In December of 2008, Amir Samad was invited to be one of the panelists in Washington, D.C. at a youth violence summit sponsored by Representative Bobby Scott of Virginia. On May 7, 2009, he again spoke on youth violence at the Youth Promise Act Day on the Hill. In 2008, 100 Black men honored this brother as one of 5 outstanding Cleveland leaders. On September 17, 2011, he spoke at a workshop during the Congressional Black Caucus weekend. In 2012, he was named as one of the community heroes by the Plain Dealer. I believe this is the main newspaper out of the Cleveland area, for his work in the community. In 2012, he also received the Community Hero Award from the North Coast Nurses Association. In 2015, he was honored by the Cleveland City Council for his tireless work with youth of Cleveland. In 2017, he was recognized by Black on Black Crime, Inc. And in February 2018, he was given an award by the city of Cleveland for his work on the streets. After the transition of humanitarian and boxing great Muhammad Ali, Brother Samad announced the Muhammad Ali Conflict Resolution and Mediation Initiative, which was an expansion of Project Community Empowerment. In December of 2017, at the opening of the Kwanzaa celebration of Umoja, Brother Samad announced the Stop the Madness, Stop the Violence, Increase the Peace campaign. With the recent epidemic of crime and violence related to the opioid crisis, it has become more important than ever for the community to come together. United we stand. Divided we do not stand a chance. Brother Samad has continued his tireless work on behalf of the youth of Cleveland, speaking in the schools, community, and religious institutions, always having time to just talk to them and provide a listening ear and guidance with their problems. He continues to be in demand as a trainer for police, school officials, and the community on issues of gang prevention and intervention and nonviolent crisis intervention and mediation. He has continued to embody and work for the principles of peace in the hood in his daily life, peace, justice, and empowerment. Now we move on to our brother T. Rashad Byrdsong. Our brother Byrdsong is founder and CEO of a unique community-based organization known as Community Empowerment Association, or CEA. He and his organization have become a strong force for human rights. He currently spearheads such efforts as Live Longer, empowering and engaging Pittsburgh communities, a community-based participatory research and problem-solving initiative in collaboration with the University of Pittsburgh's Department of Health Equity to demonstrate the relationship between life expectancy, related disparities, and various social and environmental determinants of health, and to heighten the community's understanding of health equity and its importance in achieving a dignified life. CEA has hired over 500 employees, engaged over 20,000 youth, and trained over 500 persons through its construction training program. Brother Byrdsong created a comprehensive public health approach to violence reduction for Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. He presented it through the Allegheny County and called for a paradigm shift that views violence as a preventable social disease. A noted national and international authority, he is the recipient of numerous professional awards for his work and ongoing commitment to empowering the lives of African Americans. He co-authored Afrocentric Intervention Paradigm, an overview of successful application by a grassroots organization, published in the Journal of Human Behavior in Social Environment in 2013. He co-authored Suggested Paradigm for Violence Reduction, a community-based public health approach, published in the Journal of Evidence-Based Social Work in 2015. Historical Overview of Black Suffering in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, USA. Depth of Contemporary Social Work Challenges, published in the International Journal of Social Work 2017. And Drug Abuse Trend and Profile of Current Social Crisis, published in the HSOA Journal of Addiction and Addictive Disorders in 2019. I want to welcome both of my brothers to today's conversation. I want to begin by congratulating you both on your community service. Alhamdulillah, you know, we often hear folks complaining about the lack of Black Lives Matter sentiment in the Black community, even from members of our own tribe. You brothers are a sterling example of how bogus that blanket over generalized criticism is. There is concern. There are actions being taken to address the social pandemic. And with that said, let's get into the conversation. Welcome to a conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank Almighty God Allah for your life and what you have dedicated your life to in terms of the dawah, as Islam is a prescription and a healing for the sicknesses in our community. And may Allah continue to strengthen you, your family, your organization, your collaborations, all of the things that you have done to make people understand that Islam is the solution to our people's problems.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. I want to begin with question number one. There is a perception that violent crime is getting markedly worse in Black communities around the nation. Is this perception accurate? And if so, what are the driving forces behind this uptick?
Yes, there has been an increase. And I'm glad that you gave us an opportunity to explain this based upon the bio that you just read. When we became to get together as Muslims throughout the United States, it was a result of our intention. We made niyah, and we spoke with many of the Muslim leaders in the United States in the early 80s. Myself, Brother Omar Ali Bey, we had a lot of functions with community leaders, Imam Jamil, followers of that community, Imam Wardeen's community, the Nation of Islam, you name it, all the Moors. We didn't exclude anybody because we knew that the problem that we were dealing with was enormous, and that was the height of the crack cocaine era. And Cleveland was hit hard. And so we decided that we had to come up with something that was based upon a public health model, but also community involvement, community engagement. And we wanted to make sure that our young brothers didn't see us as enemies. We came in as brothers trying to bring a solution to the problem, letting them know that this was nothing new. We had the heroin, epidemic. Wasn't an epidemic, but the heroin was a major problem in Cleveland in the 60s and 70s. You all know that. And this was a form of community control. Drugs being used to pacify and dismember the community based upon drugs being fed into the community. And we all saw the movies and stuff, and it's not even an issue now. We know about the Golden Triangle.
Right.
But when the cocaine started to come out of different cities in the United States, Cleveland was hit hard because we didn't have a real major gang problem here at the time. We had street organizations that were based upon mostly their neighborhoods. There was a sprinkling of Crips and Bloods, GDs, and different other street organizations that had their headquarters in other cities. But for the most part, the money and the drug activity was based in a few hands that were neighborhood based. But when the crack came, and then the weapons came, and this cultural phenomenon where people were being romanticized because they were rapping about drugs and violence and all these kind of things, the community was inundated. Then we had with these street organizations that were from other cities, they bought with them, money, they bought guns, they recruited, they set up paramilitary structures and things of this nature. So we called an emergency meeting made up of many of the old hustlers that were leaders back in the 60s in Cleveland, the activists, the Muslims, as we said before, other groups, that the Nation of Islam organization, the Moors. We didn't want to leave anybody out because we didn't want to be accused of being divisive. And out of those emergency meetings, we came up with an initiative, as was said earlier, where the Coalition for a Better Life, we went into different housing projects with the involvement of the Public Housing Authority and the HUD agencies. And that's where we began to go in initially. Brothers went in to talk to these young people. Many of them knew. 90% of the brothers and sisters that worked with us were formerly incarcerated people. So they weren't bringing a message that they were not familiar with. And then many of them, they were familiar with them based upon them coming from the neighborhoods that these young brothers and sisters had set up shop. And then we found out in our work, in our communication with Muslims around the country, there were Muslims doing similar things all over the United States and not getting any recognition. They were doing drug patrols in Baltimore and Detroit. There were efforts going on in New York, in St. Louis, in Philadelphia, in New Jersey, in some of the southern cities. And so we said, well, if this is the case that Muslims are involved in all this, then we need to be networking with each other and moving on in a way that we can address this stuff from a multi-pronged perspective. We say a holistic solutions for holistic problems. We understood and knew that many of our young people that we were talking to at that time literally were engaged in this self-destructive disorders, organic disorders, self-alienation, miseducation. All of these things create more and more trauma for the people and their families and the community. And the drugs and the violence that came along with that became more of a challenge. But we believe that if we came in and spoke truth to confusion and gave dawah, and then more importantly, act how we talk, then we would have some success. And that's how we got started. We were able to, by the alhamdulillah, we went into King Kennedy was what at that time I think the third most violent housing project in America outside of Chicago, where you had the two huge housing estates there, Cabrini Green and Taylor Homes, and they had already been designated for this dismantling. They were going to try to dismantle it, which became problematic as well, because those were two of the most violent and organized housing projects in America. And so consequently, just going in and relocating people was not going to solve the problem, because the people are going to take their family issues, their social issues, their community issue, their guns, their drugs, and everything right with them. as you all know. And so we went into Chicago, we went into Detroit, we went into other cities and tried to train as many people as we could to set up these proactive efforts. And alhamdulillah began to take root, and we began to see statistically the crime rate go down in a lot of these cities, because we knew who were the guys that were bringing the noise. They, you know, the ones that we dealt with, we had to interface with them, because other than law enforcement, nobody was going to challenge people walking around with AK-47s and thousands of dollars in their pockets and all that. So that's kind of how we got started. But the basis of everything we did was based on Imam, based upon faith, based upon Salah, based upon giving dawah, based upon all of the principles of Islam being implemented. Not that we were hitting on the head with the deen, but we were showing them the deen and understanding the deen in a way that was practical for their own healing and their own self-empowerment.
Speaking of healing and self-empowerment, Brother Rashad, you can weigh in on the same question with your perspective, but I also would like for you to address a term that Brother Khalid mentioned in his response, romanticizing bad culture. You know, speak to that as well, Aki, in your response to this question.
Well, I think if you give a much more a broader analysis in terms of the root cause of some of the social conditions that have impacted Black people. Well, we've been part of this freedom and liberation struggle since Plymouth Rock landed on us.
That's right.
And this new contemporary peace movement connected to the liberation movement. When we came together in the late 80s, mainly Muslims driving this effort to bring, like colleagues said, there's been people doing different things throughout the states and throughout the country, but the dots wasn't connected. We found out once we came together that some of the same circumstances existed in many zip code communities that look like us, in brown communities and poor communities also. We know the history when we started talking about street organizations didn't start selling drugs, didn't start killing one another. There was an effort to protect, you know, the Black community, Black neighborhoods from the forces that were trying to attack them or oppress them. Now, there's old saying that we used to say that oppression breeds resistance. So when we begin to talk about the increase in crime, increase in homicides and gang activities, we have to look at that there's an underground market there. And normally it's that underground market, when I say the drugs, the petty crimes, and those things like that is part of that. And now we got to also add to that a lot of emotional and mental health issues. When you begin to look at the sojourner of African people, there's a historical piece around trauma, you know, around Aafia, the great suffering, you know, the great uprooting, you know, and loss of land, loss of religion, loss of your homeland, you know, loss of family. So all those things, in addition, you know, to going through Jim Crow, 100 years of lynching, and then the segregation and the racism in the North, exclusion from jobs, exclusion from education, and we go on and on and on and on. All those things have impacted the psychic and the emotional mentality of Black people. And when you put the other layer of, for instance, the pandemic, what's going on today in the country, you see what we see today. So when you look at the increase in crime, increase in homicide, you're also looking at, you know, the impact of how white supremacy, racism have impacted Black people, and the lack of, you know, a real public health approach to address those emotional issues. So we begin to do emotional support. Emotional support was our rites of passage programs. The emotional support, you know, was sitting down with Black men and discussing what our historical, you know, relationships was to the family, to our wives, and to the community. Then we started to build institutions. Institution building is real key because it drives the narrative. And a lot of us, particularly colleagues Samad and myself, still have institutions that have been able to survive over the last 25, 26 years. The romanticizing, I think what we're talking about is a lot of contemporary activists today. They say salam alaikum, they wear the kufis, they wear Malcolm shirts, and they do all the paraphernalia things. So they romanticizing, the surface of a cultural history, but don't understand the real depth and haven't done analysis in the depth, of this liberation struggle and with some of the things that we have had to do continue to fight this here fight. Some of the things real quick, concretely, that we did to address some of those issues was we knew a lot of these young boys, was excluded from being able to have a living wage job, being able to have housing, for their families, being able to take care of themselves and their families. A lot of them have been pushed out of school. We know from a schoolyard to the prison pipeline. So there was multi-millions of Black boys being directed into the penitentiary. Also, the vocationary trades was taken out of the schools. So now we had young men that was going into their 20s, didn't have no type of economic base, no type of vocationary base, and no type of educational base. So they didn't have nothing better to do, of course, but to gravitate towards the drugs. And then and second to that is the masking of the pain. You got to ask yourself sometimes, where do Black pain go at? So a lot of the violence we see in our community have impacted the whole community, because now we're talking about the death of one child impacts the whole community, because the community is interconnected together. We're social people. So now we have mothers grieving. We have sisters and brothers grieving. We have uncles and aunts and cousins grieving. And there have been no type of relief at all to address this situation. So part of this movement that we're part of also is the empowerment. That's why we use that word, community empowerment, that we have to be responsible for what happens in our community. And there's been a definitely breakdown in social order in the Black community. Despite what you might think about the police or anything else, we're not talking about the police. We're talking about what is the accountability and what is the responsibility that we have to make sure order in our community. So this is some of the things that concretely we've been working on to address throughout the country.
Okay, alhamdulillah. In preparation for this this conversation, I prepared 7 foundational questions that I wanted to put to both of you brothers. Okay. And the second question I want to raise segues perfectly into your concluding response to that first question. From the insights that both you and Brother Khalid have gained through your experiences, what role does the availability of high-powered weapons play in this social pandemic? And is there anything of any real substance being done to address this proliferation of guns in the Black community?
Well, it's the same as proliferation of drugs too. Now, there's a strong gun lobbying in this here country. There's been a lot of movement around to address, some of these military weapon type, weaponry that's going into the hands of our community. There definitely is a Black market when you start talking about, these weapons. And at one point, until the crack cocaine hit our community, and the money that was raised from that, a lot of these young men wasn't able to get these type of weapons. But now, you have the weapons entering the Black community from different ways. You have the straw weapons where, people sell you the weapons. You have young women that's going and buying the weapons for a lot of these young guys. You have people that have license to buy the weapons also. A lot of these weapons are being stolen. So when you start talking about the proliferation of guns in our community, then yes, that's still a relevant issue, something that have to be addressed.
Okay, if is Brother Khalid still with us? And what I want to say to ask both of you brothers, especially Brother Khalid, mashallah, that if when you're not speaking, if you can mute your sound, and, you know, inshallah ta'ala, when you have to speak to someone else in the room, if you can mute your sound when you're not speaking, that would help to keep down distractions during the broadcast. But Brother Khalid, we're back with you, Aki. Did you hear the second question I raised? Brother Khalid, can you hear me? Okay. Let me go to question number 3, and then we'll come back to Brother Khalid on that second question. Brother Rashad, what role do police play in this whole scenario? What role do they play?
Well, we understand the history of law enforcement and the roots of it coming out of slavery, the slave patrols. We understand the role that they have played in protecting the social elite, you know, property and assets. We understand that. And also your containment of the Black community to keep crime in the community, opposed to not letting it break out. There been a sordid history, unfortunately, with law enforcement, you know, in our community. Like, for instance, here in Pittsburgh, we had legislation on the books where we was trying to bring the police back into the community. And you actually had the union that fought against that. Now, I remember when I was young that the policemen lived in the community that you lived in. So it was kind of hard to brutalize someone's child and you had to come home, you know, the next day. Also, the whole socialization, when you have law enforcement whose children go to the same school that neighbor children go to, that, you know, the wives go to the masjid and go to the church together. This creates synergy, you know, amongst, you know, law enforcement in our community. But now you have law enforcement, you know, and particularly a lot of these guys got some mental health issues coming out of the war. You got PTSD, you got some white privilege, you know, you got a lot of racism there. You got a lot of militia type, you know, guys joining the police force. And then you don't have no type of relief. We don't have no support from the judicial system. So, you know, historically, the police have ran amok in being able to do whatever they've been able to. That's why we see this new contemporary movement after George Floyd. People is tired that with impunity, that law enforcement is able to just kill Black people and brown people. We always said that we're not anti-police or anti-white, we anti-injustice. So they're not held to the same accountability that any other citizens are. So that's what the movement is about today. And that's why there's been a lot of contention between law enforcement, particularly in the Black community also.
Now, how important is the family and all of its constituent parts? How important is this?
You talk about our families in the community?
In the Black community, yes. How important is the institution of family?
There's a saying to say, I am because we are, and we are because I am. There's always been an interconnection, an interrelationship, an extended family. We are a social people. I remember growing up when you didn't even have no name, you didn't even have no identity because you were so-and-so's child. You know, they always mention your family's name first. So what that meant is that you have a relationship or accountability to your family. And that's why we have people in our community used to say, I know you know better than that because I know your mama, I know your grandparents, so they try better. But there's a disconnect due to a lot of social issues that's going on in our community between families. The family, you know, is the first unit, you know, of the community. And the community is the first unit of the nation. So families make up nationhood. But the way they disconnected now, matter of fact, I was talking to some developers not too long ago, how they done carved up the Black community. So in other words, we can do regional development, but we're going to carve up your community. So we go to each community which have leadership, opposed to coming together collectively
Mm-hmm.
and talking about our collective needs. Because in my community, my city, all of the certain zip codes, is the same treatment. And those zip codes where we're seeing abject and concentrated poverty, those zip codes are the zip codes that we get large reentry of brothers and sisters coming home from the penitentiary. Those zip codes are the unperforming schools. So it's real clear where these problems are. It's just that the inability and neglect to address them. And lastly, we as a people can, after years and years of social engineering, 500 years of social engineering, to feel that we have to ask for permission, to feel that we're not capable of being builders and architects and controllers and landowners. So a lot of the oppression against us has been emotional and it's been psychological, making us believe that we're not in a position to be able to take care of ourselves. And that's where a lot of the programs like Right to Passage program and manhood development training type things is letting young people know that you got the ability. Y'all guys are scholars. Y'all guys, was empire builders. So education and information plays a lot when it comes down to understanding what the historical and contemporary role of the Black family is.
Alhamdulillah. I'm glad. Alhamdulillah. Very, very good response, my brother. I want to, now that Brother Khalid is back with us, alhamdulillah, I want to put these, give you an opportunity to respond to these same questions, Aki. The role that the availability of high-powered weapons plays in this social pandemic, and whether or not there is anything of any real substance being done to address this proliferation of guns in the community from your perspective. That was one question. The second is the role that the police are playing in this this pandemic in our communities. And lastly, the role of the family. What is the role of the family in this whole equation? So, Brother Khalid, you respond as well, Lucky.
Alhamdulillah, I appreciate the question. And it links right into the understanding we are Muslim. And in our community, we know that many of the strongest, roughest, toughest brothers in prison became Muslim or had some kind of understanding if they were a part of a formation, you understand, with the Muslim community. And when many of these young brothers came home, they came to the mosque. They might not have done a 360 total transformation, this and that, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But they respected the streets. They respected what we were trying to do. We would go and sit down with all of the shot callers, the imams, the ministers, store owners. So there was an understanding that there are rules to the game. There's no game without no rules. It's the same thing with the young brothers and the weapons. When they came into Cleveland, they were coming in with, the 20, 30 bullet, the 9mm, the AK-47. They had all of that, and they had Arabic names. They came out of the jungle. They came out of South Central. They came out of parts of LA, and then we were like, well, we sat down and started trying to meet with them about what happened in your family. That answers the question about the family situation, because some of them had knowledge of self. Some of them had been involved with the organization or Muslim mosques and whatever. And then we tapped into brothers like the leaders of brothers out of the jungle that were Muslim leaders, the Imam, who was a former big gang leader in LA, and said, okay, so what we got is a situation where there are people with Islamic Muslim backgrounds, culturally and whatever, and we're going to try to go in and make this peace work. So we went to the masjid and we asked these brothers to look, man, can y'all calm this stuff down? And then if you need some help, we'll help you. But the main thing is that we asked them, well, what were these beefs about that they were having? And you know how the story is, it goes back a little ways and then you can't even find out why it's connected. So our thing was, okay, we need rumor control. We need to have shot callers that can go into the areas and resolve a dispute. or try to resolve a conflict, no retaliation unless some of the heads of the street organizations or those who are working in those capacities are involved in it. And that took root in Watts, and it worked. And if we put together the largest, most effective, peace treaty right there in '92, unfortunately, the LA thing jumped off right after that, but it held in Watts. So it showed that even with the weapons and a lot of these people with violence past got together to talk with each other and work with each other and resolve conflicts amongst each other. Then the only time it wouldn't work is if somebody from a police intelligence unit or something like that wanted it not to work, and many times they were involved in that. So this is that whole thing you're talking about, and it's a perfect question about the how do they criminalize a whole community? How do you criminalize streets? By making sure that those streets are connected with a street organization, they've given a moniker, and next thing you know, anybody from gang intelligence or the gang squad or gang units can go in and just terrorize people, arrest them, do this and do that. But they held it in '92. If you go back and you look, that the crime rate, the weapons of mass destruction, shootings, retaliation, in every city that this movement went began to go down. And Biden and them, instead of them seeing that, which they did see it, and those were coming up with this 3 strikes you out, minimum mandatory, truth in sentencing, and so much so that it was like they weren't paying attention to the statistics. They saw it, but they were not going to affirm, acknowledge, and embrace what we were doing. And the main reason is because we were Muslim. The main reason is our names was Rashad and Abdullah and Askia and all that. They were still stuck on that bull crap about being anti-Muslim instead of just pro who was ever bringing the peace to the streets. And these brothers and sisters were Imam Mujahid, up there in LA, sitting down with Crips and Bloods, had a Juma prayer in his masjid in LA, and Muslim Christians and Muslim Crips and people who had been involved in the jungle and all these organizations, T. Rogers and them, came to the table, and the peace was in the roots with the work that they were being done. So it lets you know what they're talking about now is just the same kind of game, so to speak, to what they were dealing with in the late '80s and early '90s when these truces and these peace treaties were actually taking hold. And so then we came to Kansas City and held the largest gang summit in the history of the United States with people from the East Coast, West Coast, Mexican mafia, those that were involved in those street organizations, the Puerto Rican brothers and sisters. So not only was it a black thing, it became a brown thing. And in addition to that, once we left Kansas City, they came to Cleveland for the first official national organizing summit that involved many of these ministers who were you're going to be bearing one of the Reverend Mauri, one of the most influential Christian minister, the Israelites, the Black Israelites, T. Rogers and them, the groups coming under the Moore Science Temple of America, and those of us who are affiliated with groups Ensure, with Imam Muhammad, Dean's community, Imam Jamil's community. All of these communities were coming together, and what we were doing was working. And we followed it, we tracked it because we had access. I worked in the gang unit, so I could tell you the statistics about the number of shootings, and those statistics, were working. So it was a COINTEL program, kind of like revisited, where the Justice Department, instead of them embracing what we were doing, they were going after. That's why Imam Jamil was targeted.
Oh, brother.
That's why Imam Jamil was targeted.
Brother, this is a perfect segue into the next 2 questions I want to raise. And I'm going to combine because for the sake of time, I'm going to combine the next 2 questions, and I want both of you to weigh in as heavily as you feel comfortable in doing. What is the role of the clergy in Black communities vis-a-vis this challenge? How effective has this institution of the clergy been? And this is very important, Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, the former H. Brown, what was his role in pushing back on internecine violence in the Black community? And how much are we losing with him being where he is today?
If you want me to go first, Rashad, it's
go
up
ahead.
to you.
Go ahead, brother.
We in every major city, there was a community that was affiliated with Imam Jamil or affiliated with somebody that we had relationships with and understanding. In Chicago, the group that used to be called the Blackstone Rangers, Al Rukin or whatever, Vice Lords, and many of the larger street organizations, a lot of the leadership from the GDs and out of the other housing estates, Cabrini Green, the Hustlers, Four Corner Hustlers, all of them had relationships with those had relationships with Imam Jamil. The same thing in New York with Imam Talib and many of the mosques affiliated with Ward Dean in Harlem, in Brooklyn, and those organizations that were working with the Hispanic organizations that were working with organizations directly with Muslims who spoke Spanish. Also in Boston, in New Jersey, in Cleveland, and all throughout the South, they were obviously Atlanta, where Imam Jamil was based at that time, down in Birmingham, all throughout the West Coast. So what was happening is they saw that the crime rates were falling, and there was obviously increase in Muslims being more visible, starting to own their own businesses, going back and taking care of their families. They were beginning to work with other Muslims across the lines. They were having football games between Bloods and Crips. They were playing basketball. The most one of the most effective things that was done was the organizations that would work with us, that we started what was called the Riyadh, the Muslim Olympics. And we had all kind of teams of former gang members. In fact, El Rook and Blackstone, Bloods and Crips came down. They played in the basketball tournaments. They participated in the other events that were going on. And what happened is they were taking shahadas left and right. And you're absolutely right. The federal government was going after Imam Jamil and the work that we were doing. And we began to see it because more and more FBI informants, you were coming to us telling, look, man, they trying to, put something together on y'all. They're trying to put together a RICO thing, So everybody, nobody's stupid, but that's what was going on. When we had Imam, you remember Imam Khalil that passed away in North Carolina, right? Yes. We had the Riyadh scheduled to be down there in Greensboro. Before, 2 weeks before it took place, myself and a couple other Muslims who were police officers went down to make sure that, everything was going to be all right, with having the function down there. And it was, who's this guy? Yeah, H. Rat Brown, this and that. Everybody's dossiers, pictures, and this and that. And it's like, okay, here we go. But we weren't involved in any kind of illegalities, anything like that. We went to talk to the restaurateur that was hosting the banquet. He said the FBI had paid him a visit, told him don't rent you all the space. We talked with a police officer that was Muslim. They talked with a guy that had the place where you could go. We were gonna have a gun competition. Not AK-47s and automatic weapons, handgun competition. They were approached by the FBI. The FBI said, look, man, you can't host. These guys are terrorists. And so we saw what was going on. And then there was no incidents. But then when they got back to Atlanta was when the first incident took place about this situation where this young brother had said Imam Jamil had shot him. Remember that?
Yes, in the leg.
And when we talked to that young brother, he just basically said, look, man, I lied. I ain't know who shot me, and it wasn't Imam Jamil because I know who he is. He said, I know we call him the old man. I said, well, what happened? He said, man, the FBI and the police department brought me in and said that I got to say that Imam Jamil shot me. And if I don't say that, I'm going to be charged with this. I'm going to be charged with that. My mother's going to be charged. He held his ground. And if you remember, it just went away. The brothers, wasn't no charges filed. So this, we know that what we were doing was working. And that was the same year the Million Man March. And it was an incident at the Million Man March. Imam Jamil told people to lay back, but some of us we went in and went on up in there, but you know what I mean. They were trying to provoke a situation between the Nation of Islam and the Sunni Muslims, but they couldn't get it off because all of us had working relationships in every major city. So we knew who the security was, who to go to if it was a problem, and the provocateurs were being exposed.
Alhamdulillah. Brother Rashad, you weigh in as well, brother. The role of the clergy in the black communities and Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, his impact.
Yeah. Well, in regards to the Imam, we remember him also when he was rapping.
Yes, indeed.
Hundreds and thousands of people, they love rap. And as an imam, hundreds and thousands of Muslims love rap. The influence that this brother had on Muslim and secular people alike, right? And then you got to remember the COINTELPRO, the history of the COINTELPRO, particularly during the Black Liberation Movement. And we can go even back to Marcus Garvey, and going up the road, the COINTELPRO. And then when we look at the sort of the kind of split in between SCLA and SNCC, and those young people becoming the disciples of Malcolm, it took a whole different ideological, direction. So those brothers and sisters was targeted. They've been having their eyes on the Imam from day one. One thing about this country and the security, system they have, they don't forget you. They remember who you are, and they target you the rest of your life. And this is what happened to the Imam. He's been targeted. He's been set up. In Atlanta, around the community masjid, you don't have no drug dealing going on. You don't have no prostitution going on. You don't have no crime at all. So that shows the impact that this brother and the dean had on people. So that was the threat, because Brother Khalid talked about the whole criminalization of Black and brown people generate trillions of dollars of money in corrections. We go on and on and on and on. The money that's being generated by putting people into that system. So in addition to that, the influence the Imam gave us close to 20-some years ago, Nasia ensure on what we needed to do to address the situation about violence in our community. And Brother Khalid and myself, since then, been traveling extensively throughout the country with that message. And I remember, Khalid, when we went to Mississippi, and it was the civil rights. These brothers and sisters in the 80s now, 70s, 80s, and they still pushing the agenda. And the Imam was part of those brothers and sisters that still push this agenda to this very day in the 70s and 80s down there. In regards to clergy, one of the things that I see that, first of all, we know that the Black church always was the rock of the community. When there was problems with the children, when you have family problems, social problems, marital problems, they went to the church. They went to the pastor. But then also there was an investment from the community. Family, you talk about families. Families make up the community. They make up the masjids, the ulama. They make up, the Christian church. So they have the impact like everybody else. There's been a breakdown. Then you have churches now that's competing against one another. They want to get into development now. Everybody want to have the little daycare now. So you don't really see that level of collective participation. I had put out a piece one time, not too long ago, about, because we have a church on every block. We have a bar on every block. We got a church on every block. So I put out a call to a lot of ministers where I'm from. Why don't y'all adopt the block? I brought to the attention of one brother in the church, you didn't have 9 homicides outside of your church, and the church was closed. Nobody was there. So that's another thing, that the doors of the church, now I'm talking about pre-COVID, the church doors was closed. So I'm saying that when you're looking at how we put this reinsurgent effort into the family, it starts in the institutions where families are. It starts in the masjids. It starts in the churches. It starts in the social clubs. It starts in the Greek clubs. These are where Black people at. And then from there got to be a strong confederation. We got to start to confederate. I'm not talking this networking. I'm talking about sitting down and talking about it and writing out what the relationship is going to be in this confederation in order to have a broader impact and effect, on the broader community. So those are some of the things we started looking at, the clergy and the faith-based in our community that they lack in, invest into the broader community, because a lot of these your folks don't live in the community no more.
Yeah.
So when
moved
they
out.
come to the community, they get like blinders on. They don't see what's going on outside of the church no more. And then the indigenous people around the church isn't welcome into the church no more. So those are some of the things that we have to correct around that in the community.
Man, can I
Okay.
interject on something that you said earlier? And it speaks to what you're asking about. During the time that we were doing this work, Imam, we were meeting with every major head of the Black clergy organization. We met with Jesse Jackson. In fact, Jesse Jackson's stepbrother was in prison because they said he was a member of the Blackstone Rangers. So we knew he was a part of what we were doing. We went to Trinity Cathedral. When we had the first gang summit, Obama was not even a known factor, but he was a member of Trinity Cathedral, and the minister was there. What's his name? Was Reverend Scott? Remember the one that they moved out of his position at the church?
Yeah.
Because he was making it plain. He was the one that helped spur a lot of participation from the United Church of Christ. That's when the brother got involved with the nation. Brother, what's his name? He had changed his name and he went back. He was a civil rights leader.
Yeah, I know you're talking about. I can't think of his name right now.
Right.
Yeah, I know you're talking about though.
Yeah. So what happened is we sat down with the head of all of those national Black Baptist, Unitarian, United Church. They weren't gonna get out there and do the work, but we had certain people. In fact, the brother that was the first chairman of the National Council was Carl Upchurch, who was he was a member of the United Church of Christ, but his best friend was a brother named Imam Khalid out of Pittsburgh. They were incarcerated together, and that's how we came together and formulated, like brother said, a peace treaty. We had signed off on peace treaties and non-aggression pacts, all that kind of stuff. Why can't we sit down and have a peace treaty when you got these people who are killing each other left and right around the world? They put peace treaties together and non-aggressions, you know what I mean? So you're right. The Hebrew Israelites, we went on Hajj, and we went into the areas what they call the Dead Sea, but still life, and up the street is where the Hebrew Israelites ran, and a lot of former GDs, growth and development guys who was a member of that street organization, they were living right up there in Demona. So like what we're saying is here, we ain't really got to prove it that we did, but we have all the statistical data to show that what we did worked. And then you got people like, certain people who made it into high offices and on a national level and all that kind of stuff. I just think they got cold feet because they had it. We had that thing tight, man. And they just would not send any resources. They would send us to the Ford Foundation, this foundation. We come with proposals, well written. We dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and all that, and still would not get the substance, economic development that we needed. So to answer your question, now we got another kind of epidemic, fentanyl. These young brothers that are out here now are the grandsons of some of the ones that was with us on all of the peace treaty, and they got a different kind of understanding. So the outreach is going to have to continue to be there, but I don't know how they, with somebody like, this guy who's running for president, you know what I'm saying? He was part of the problem.
Yes.
I don't know. They said they're going to try to wrap him up with a leftist rap or leftist, vest, if you know what I'm saying, Biden. But Biden was pro-police, pro-3 strikes you out. I'm going to say one more thing, and now you got to move it around. Sir, the reason why crime went up in Baltimore, the way that it did, and the homicide rate, the way that it did, the guy from The Wire and all them kind of guys, they had a group of brothers that were incarcerated in LA called the Black Gangsters. What was that called? Not Black Gangsters.
Guerrilla Family.
The Black Guerrilla Family. We had got in touch with their leadership because some of them were involved in drug activity in LA. So the BGF was probably looked upon as the most formidable prison street organization in America. They took a lot of them brothers from Cali and moved them into the prisons in Maryland and paid the state of Maryland for them being incarcerated. So they didn't have no gangs in Baltimore like that. They didn't, not the BGF was highly organized, extremely violent, and they went right into Baltimore and bought all that stuff. Not the ones that wouldn't go along with the peace treaties. And they're still trying to recover from that right now in Baltimore. This is what these people do.
Yeah. Okay, my brothers. Now we are we're actually at the end of the program, but there's one last question I want both of you to weigh in on. It's a very important question. Both of you have already touched upon it in indirect ways, but you can weigh in on it in whatever way you want, along with whatever closing thought that you feel should be that the audience should be left with. The last question I want to put to the two of you: what are some of the things that everyday folk can do to help make a difference?
Rashad, you want to go first?
For me, is one of the things we got to look at is the systematic.
You still there, bro? For some reason, we're not hearing Brother Rashad. Okay, Brother Khalid, go ahead. You weigh in.
What we've been involved in is trying to work with some of the younger population and trying to get into their psyche through cultural arts. We have a program called, cultural arts, 99 treasures, which obviously is a euphemism for 99 attributes of Allah. And so 99 treasures, arts and culture, we're using that as the outreach effort. So what you'll hear from Rashad, he's back on to tell you what he's doing in terms of the cultural piece, to deal with the psyche, to deal with the self-hatred, the self-destructive disorder, to deal with the organic disorders, to go in and deal with the alienation and the self-rejection disorders by having them to draw what's on their mind, or to write about it, or to do hip-hop, or to do plays, to do something to use what Allah has given them in terms of their creativity, their ka'umba, to use that to help to heal themselves so they can redirect their energies in a proactive way.
Alhamdulillah.
One of the things I was attempting before I got cut off was that we need to look at the systemic structural impediments that lead to the perpetuation of the behavior and the violence we see. The violence is symptomatic of some much more deep-rooted things. So the key is to empower, organize, and empower people around issues that impact them: violence, education, concentrated poverty, workforce development, economic development, entrepreneurship, institution building. All these here things will give us the ability to be in control of the narrative. And once we change the narrative, then we can start working on, some of these here symptoms of those root causes of what we're talking about.
Alhamdulillah. I want to thank both of you brothers for the time and the expertise that you brought to this conversation today on a very, very challenging subject. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless you in the work that you've been doing for years. May Allah ta'ala magnify the benefits of that work and make it something that will benefit you and those who have worked side by side with you in this life and the next. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to be coming back again sometime in the near future to revisit or pick up from where we've left off on this conversation on this issue, because this is a very, very important issue. It's been with us. It's not going to go anywhere. And, we need brothers like yourself to help inspire the generations coming behind us.
To
pick up the baton.
Jahari and Hodari and Raheem Jenkins. I want to make sure I give them a shout out too, if it's okay with you, because they were all involved with this initial summit. And I do remember Raheem Jenkins, Hodari, Jahari, and yourself and the summits that were put together in Washington, D.C., Imam Ali and all those brothers and sisters there as well.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, brother.
So again, thank you very much, my brothers. May Allah Ta'ala bless you. We're gonna be making this this video. I'm gonna be sending you the link to it shortly, inshallah. And we encourage you to share it far and wide. There was a lot of very good information that came through this discussion. And inshallah Ta'ala, as they say in South Africa, alutua continua, the struggle continues. Assalamu
Ubuntu.
alaikum. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Amandala. Assalamu alaikum.
Alhamdulillah.
Wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.